Greetings, friends. Greetings to you who will tune in to this case study in the time to come. I am Ian McKenzie, and I'm grateful to be joined by a good friend, Christou, all the way from France, I believe, at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. It's a pleasure to be here, Ian, and to be able to participate in some of this work that you've been doing.
Mm.
So I hope your listeners and your followers, can get something out of this.
Yeah, thanks. This intention of this is to be a bit of a case study, just to speak a little of your own podcasting journey, of which I had a bit of a part to play. And maybe to situate the listeners first, well, one, you could say, speak a little bit of your podcast. Well, I mean, I can say that it's the end of tourism. And maybe first to begin, what drew you to want to produce a podcast? Maybe speak a little bit about your body of work. But what was it that you said? Actually, I think I'd like to try a podcast.
Mm, yeah, um, I guess the short of it is that some 5 6 years ago I started writing a manuscript on the unauthorized history of tourism or wanderlust. And after 4 or 5 years, I finished the manuscript, and part of that research involved discovering that there are myriad different uh, anti-tourism uh, anti-tourism movements around the world. They might not call themselves that, but they all kind of can be collected under that banner, under that umbrella. So after writing the manuscript, I decided that having those voices amplified for the general public would be really, really beneficial in being able to disseminate this quote unquote unauthorized history and finding a way to create solidarity on an international and worldwide scale between these movements that seem to be trying to survive under the weight of the storm of gentrification, exile, tourism, and all the aforementioned consequences.
Mm.
So yeah, that is in a nutshell how it started.
Great. Well, I'd be happy to offer a few more questions. So when you began, so I understand when you've been doing it for about a year now, year and a half, maybe about a year.
It's been public. Uh, we've been live for a year, so
Okay.
it's been about a year and a half in total between going live and also the kind of pre-production stages.
Mm. Congratulations. It is a milestone.
Mm.
My question is, what was your existing knowledge around both the technical, maybe the creative side when you began this? Just to give a snapshot to the listener to say, where were you? Did you have a ton of knowledge at the outset? Did you have to learn, or did you need to seek how to learn? Yeah, where were you then?
Yeah, at that point, I didn't even I knew relatively little about the podcasting world, even about the content within the podcasting world. I think I listened to maybe two or three off and
Hmm.
on. And coming to the idea, I realized that I am, or I was anyways, somewhat of a Luddite in terms of technology and just not having a really deep body of knowledge or skill around the technical aspects about it. So I did. I luckily I had some friends to help on the website, but then coming to the production of the podcast itself was very very daunting. In part because I had no experience with this online world, despite the pandemic and despite what most of us had to go through in regards to becoming, I guess, Zoomites or members in that club. So, and I was yeah, very blessed. The timing was quite perfect as well. That I had gotten in touch with you and asking a little bit, in regards to would you be able to offer something in regards to an introduction to podcasting.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you were
Great.
very, very gracious and
Mm,
kind, and and also merciful in your way of bringing all of this information forward. I mean, so you did say yes, and something I'm very, very grateful for. And I don't know if you wanted
mm.
to go deeper into that, but that was about
Yeah.
a year ago now, or maybe a little less, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what you're referring to for the listener is I did a sort of a small test workshop, back then because I was asked by yourself and another friend had asked me for some guidance, and I said, okay, well, let's do a little, mini test workshop, which in some ways was the prototype of podcasting 101, which is a workshop I did now about a month or two ago. It's available as a recording. You can find it on my website. That's really great if you're just wanting to, yeah, do a kind of drive by whiplash about all of the different aspects of podcasting. It's a couple hours, and there's another module around the marketing side and design. And so, yeah, you're welcome to download that. But then I'm curious. So, what was it at that time for you, Chris? Where what you learned, what I was able to share, how did that support you in the journey? Again, was it,
Mm.
inspiration? Was it simply, "Oh, yeah, this is possible because now this person just laid out a bit of the groundwork," like making what felt a little unwieldy and, too much all of a sudden become a little more accessible? Yeah, I'm curious to know how that helped.
Yeah, definitely all of those things. I have one of the podcasts that I had been listening to was yours, so it was, that's why I reached out in part, and as well being a good friend and an amazing podcast host.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, I think that that session that we did together was a little bit of the wizard pulling the curtain open and
mm,
being like, here, look, it's not so difficult, right? This is what this button does, and this is what that button does. Of course, it was a little more complicated than that, and it was, I think, the first and foremost for me, the technical side of things that was really, really beneficial, like the different options, uh, ways to move towards different options in regards to um, editing the podcast, recording the podcast, microphone technology, on and on and on, all of the essentials, and then also the alternatives.
mm,
So the technical side of things was really, really important. It was also an opportunity, yeah, for me to kind of get a glimpse of, I guess, what you do, and within that, yeah, there was a huge amount of inspiration and and motivation,
mm.
to do some good work and amplify the voices in the neighborhood, as we say. So,
And what was it like then to actually jump into the process, right? I mean, one of the things I typically say up front is it's more work than you think. It's more work than you think. It's more work than you think. And so, yeah, what was that? I mean, not just the work, but also maybe the delight or the joy of the process. Like, curious to hear about that.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that from the point of view of someone who comes from a background of not working as so much in technology and audio visual skills, um, things have seemed to become much, much more accessible in perhaps the last few years or in the last decade. And that was something that, as well, was, it was very daunting starting from scratch in that regard. But I think, with the kind of guidance and advice that you offered in that session, I was ready to go. And it was, and it is an immense amount of work. And I say that even after a year having become very used to this kind of work and the technical side of things. I guess I'm just another random person, but I guess I could offer your listeners, I think the learning curve was probably about 2 to 3 months.
Mm,
after the initial launch. So it does take some time, I think, at the beginning. You can launch, but then there's all these aspects to it that you lay out in your session, and I'm sure as well in the accelerator, uh, as to how that you know can be dealt with, can be mitigated, informed, and also a joyful experience of learning something new in this regard.
mm. What was it like when you had the first episode there and you're ready to hit publish, that first time? I mean, there's always that moment of kind of like, what's going to happen? Is the internet going to break? Is it, is there going to be
Hmm.
floodgates of listeners? Maybe just situate us in that moment.
Yeah, I think it's really really exciting because you've already done all of the pre-production, editing, recording, post-production work on one, two, maybe even three episodes at launch. So all of that stuff is kind of out of the way. Um, all those kinks have generally been dealt with, and it's incredibly exciting, and it's it's nerve wracking, but I think part of the deal as well is not to have expectations right off the bat. That's something that I learned very very quickly. Um, Not because my expectations were through the roof, but because the subject or content that I am producing is generally considered somewhat niche. So you're not really sure how it's gonna take off. Um, but yeah, I mean, after a year of doing interviews and even the technical side of things, it's really a fun experience, for me. So I hope it is for your people as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I've understood too, and I've been a filmmaker, of course, for many years, and often there's quite a lag time from interviewing, editing, all that stuff, and often can take years, right, to
Mm,
to have that moment when the viewers, right, you have an audience there and they're experiencing it. And I find with podcasting actually that it can be the turnaround is much quicker. Typically with the Mythic Masculine, I was doing it once a week. Uh, and I have another show, The Crow's Nest now, live show, which is also this is once a week. And so yeah, there's this quicker turnaround. It feels just more dynamic and more satisfying in some ways than the long lag times that often come with other mediums. And so for me, that's
mm,
also something that I didn't fully anticipate, but I was actually fairly delighted by. I wonder now for also, now that you've been doing it for about a year or so, yeah, what did you learn? What was surprising now? What are the ebbs and flows essentially of a year in the podcasting journey?
mm. Yeah. I mean, surely, I imagine most people uh, who begin engage in and work with podcasts, that they're doing so promoting on social media. So that's been also, something to learn about in a good way. But what's been fascinating, I think, most of all, is that I've had people reach out from all over the world, um, you know, countless different backgrounds, and extend their gratitude for the work that me myself and my guests are trying to honor by having these conversations. And within that, there's this deeper capacity, um, not just technically by virtue of these people knowing about the pod or having these conversations, but in terms of building a kind of, a network, for example, of
Mm,
solidarity around these issues. And so, my podcast in particular, um, intends to do that, right? It intends to build this kind of network of solidarity. And so, I don't think it's just for maybe political themes, but certainly there's this way of engaging with the general public that allows this feedback that can come in many different forms, right? And in this case, in the political or socioeconomic realm, it can be forms of solidarity, and I'm sure there's many others. but there's this way of connecting with the general public that doesn't necessarily, I say this, demand a certain amount of fame, I guess. You
Mm.
know, uh, so.
Well, yeah, this highlights, I think, though, which is also something I really try to impart, which is a creative, and not just in podcasting, but I think any artist also needs to define what are their metrics of success. And so,
Mm,
for some it might be numbers, right? It might actually be a certain amount of listeners over time, whatever it is. That can be a helpful metric, but it's not the only one, certainly. And that for others, it can be, just connecting, like you said, building a network of solidarity, building relationship. It can be just the satisfaction of the creative process, right? It can be, revenue, creating new revenue streams, if that was the case. So I think it's really important. A lot of people sometimes they adopt metrics that they didn't really consider, right, as
mm,
actually as necessary or even vital to them, right? Whereas I think if you come up with your own of like, this is what this is, to be a success, I think is really important because then when you hit it, typically, right?
mm.
And you're not sort of chasing a phantom metric of success that actually didn't originate with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that, the subjects that me and my guests focus on the pod are fairly niche to some degree, right? And it might be, you know, without sounding too um, uh, I don't know, pompous or anything. It might be like a little bit ahead of its time.
Mm,
But anyways, that's all just to say that the listenership isn't, in the hundreds of thousands, and it's not surprising either, given that they're conversations that a lot of people just don't want to have,
mhm,
necessarily, or don't want to listen to, because it's unnerving, right? And not in a bad way. Anyways, and but the people who do listen to the pod listen to every episode, consistently. That's all the feedback I get from pretty much anyone who has feedback. Is I either binge it or I've listened to every
mm,
episode and going into like specific episodes and which ones they love the most and why. So yeah, I think it's important not to even also not to have expectations around the metrics, because like you said, there are different ways of understanding success, and it's important not to just pigeonhole yourself into one of
mm. Well, where can they find it if they want to have a listen to the end of tourism?
them. Yes. Well, theendoftourism.com is the website. The handles, the social media handles are the end of tourism on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And yeah, I mean, I just want to say that I don't think any of it could have been possible without your guidance and without your advice and example. Really, Ian, it's
Mm,
been I say that as not just as a friend, but as someone who's been on the receiving end of your good grace in this way. And so
mm,
what I had to work out personally of out of an hour and a half with you, I'm sure we'll make things much much more simple and also adventurous and joyful for the people in your accelerator,
mm.
right? Because it's 5 weeks, right? Is that right?
Indeed. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks, Chris. The accelerator you mentioned as well. This case study itself will live on beyond that this particular accelerator, but that's happening next week, September 13th. And if you're considering it all, and this is before that date, please, you're welcome to join. And as well, I just love talking about this stuff, digging, jamming with other creatives. Thanks for taking what I offered and modeled, Chris, and running with it in your own way. That's also immensely satisfying, for me as I like to empower others to really do what they're feeling called to do. So again, I want to thank you for your time here, beaming in all the way from France on your own pilgrimage of sorts. And yeah, I appreciate our time and our wondering today.
Likewise, Ian. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Mm.
Blessings. Godspeed.